Welcome to 239 Uncensored Everything Southwest Florida and beyond. And we have a great podcast today. Very interesting. This episode is going to be with Sergeant Dan Mcdonald, really good friend of mine for a long time. We've worked together all these years. Dan, welcome to the studio. Is this kind of fun, you think? Or yeah, no. Yeah, we're so glad that you're in. And, we've been talking over the years. I know you've been a big proponent of autism. You have a son with autism.
I do.
And, you've really pushed Collier County to the forefront through education. You've opened up a lot of people's minds as to what and how to deal with autism. And I got to really thank you for that. And I really appreciate you coming on and kind of telling us a little bit of a project that the Collier County Sheriff's Office has, and it's the Autism Support Project. And we all know that this month is very special to you. Tell us a little bit about what this month is.
This month April is always Autism Awareness Month. April 2nd is World Autism Awareness Day. That was last Saturday. There were some events going on around the county in support of that. But April is a special month to bring awareness, understanding, and support into understanding autism, and also the project the Sheriff's Office has.
Yeah, and I think it's very important that people understand that, I think autism is, when I think of autism, I really have learned a lot over the years, but I also have learned that these kids, and all kids are really special, right? But I think these kids are like really, and obviously with your son, it's very important that we understand a little bit about, how they might act when they see us, how we relate to them. And I think as far as not just for public safety and first responders, but for the community in general. I mean, could you kind of just give us a little bit about how that's, autism has impacted your life with your son?
Well, absolutely. One of the things that we want to bring forward is everybody is always, as a society, we're growing every day. Information is always coming forward. It's always being shared. But in addition to that, part of what the project and what we want to do here in Collier is we want to let both the kids, the young adults that are on the spectrum, but also their parents. We want to explain to them that they're not in this by themselves. They're not alone. There is a support mechanism there. They can reach out and ask for help. We never turn any type of disability away. So if somebody contacts us and says, my child has a disability, but it's not autism, can I still look to you for support? The answer is absolutely. We'll do anything we can anytime to help. A lot of times it's information and referral to other resources. How it has affected me personally. The biggest thing that it probably has done is to let me understand that there are resources out there, and sometimes it takes a little bit of work, a little bit of research, a little bit of digging, a lot of communication to find out what those resources are and how they can be best applied to any family.
Very good. Yeah, because I think a lot of times people might think that they can maybe take on some of this on their own, right? And we've had that discussion. And there's a lot of different groups and programs, and obviously you want to find something that fits for your needs, right? But there's a lot of people out there that kind of try to team together and try to help out. When did the Collier County Sheriff's Office, and when did you reach out to the sheriff and get that support and get this program going?
Well, I've been teaching it since about 2008, and then a lot of times it was through whether it's referrals to other agencies, whether it was I had an outside employment with a company where we taught both around the state and around the country. But as far as the agency went with the support project we're currently talking about, there was probably about a year and a half ago, I was contacted by Sarasota County Sheriff's Office. Sheriff Hoffman up there had asked about how a similar project could be applied to his agency. In that process, and just making sure some of the training I was agreeing to go and provide was within accordance with our agency's permission, Colonel Bloom had come to me and said, let's sit down and explain this a little bit more to me, give me a better understanding. And he took that information, sat down with the sheriff, came back to me in November, right around Thanksgiving, and said, we'd like to put this in place within our agency, move forward full speed ahead. And they've been absolutely 100% supportive of everything we've tried to do.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I know here we got a really cool, if you can see it, a really cool logo. And you've got the sheriff's office badge type thing, and you got the actual badge, and you've got the like the patch work, and you've got obviously the autism colors and puzzle and on that. That's really good thought putting that together.
Thank you. I work with Jamie Mossbach in our public information office. She did a great job. That was our final draft. The reason we have that in place is we wanted to develop something. As you mentioned, the puzzle piece has always been synonymous with recognizing autism. We wanted to develop a logo here locally that people could see, and maybe they're not close enough to read what it is, but we wanted them to recognize what it is. And we were doing that for a couple of different reasons, but it's been very positive, a lot of community support, and it's moving forward very strongly.
Okay, so what are the objectives of the project? Autism Project.
What we wanted to do was we wanted to approach it in a 3-area objective. And that was, first one was training. Currently, every public safety agency in Collier County I've been in contact with, they've been supportive. We're currently 3 days a week. Every week this month, we are teaching Greater Naples Fire. Last month was Immokalee Fire. Next month is City of Naples Fire. All 3 police departments in the county. EMS, the month of October is going to be all EMS training. So everybody's been very receptive. So we have that first aspect of training, and that is through public safety. The second is education.
Yeah, real quick on that though. Just so let's just go back, because the listener wants to know, like, what is that training? I mean, what do you do? Yeah, sure. Just like give us like an example, like, when you come up on a house or you see somebody on the sidewalk, or give us a little bit on it.
What we do is we talk about what is it, how to recognize it, because 50% of the kids on the autism spectrum never develop speech. So how do we recognize, and how can we communicate and convey an understanding of what it is we're potentially dealing with? So what we do is we tell them there's 3 areas of autism. It's social interaction, it's self-isolation, and it is repetitive behavior. And I tell them your focus should be on repetitive behavior. Oh, okay. And it can be subtle. It can be something as subtle as just scratching my arm, but that repetitive behavior, we all know if you have an itch on your arm, you can usually satisfy that itch in 5-10 seconds. But if you see somebody standing there and that repetitive behavior continues and continues, it may be something more present that you're not aware of. So we tell them how to recognize it, how to de-escalate it, questions that are good to ask parents. For instance, if they're nonverbal, 40% of kids on the autism spectrum have some type of seizure-related disorder. So what happens if you're nonverbal and the child has a seizure? One of the great questions for EMS and fire to ask is, how does he react when he comes out of a seizure? Is he combative? Because it's not engaging somebody in the conversation you and I would be in. So that's what we build on with public safety, when to ask for additional resources. For instance, if law enforcement responds to a missing child and they pull into that gated community, and let's say that they have a big clubhouse and a big swimming pool. Well, remember, autism is about isolation, social interaction. They don't want to be around other people. So as important as it is to check the clubhouse and look at that pool, it's also important to ask the family, does your son or daughter swim? And if they do, what pool do they go to? Oh, they go to the neighbor's house. Now that's telling us in a very time critical scenario where we need to start our search. That's the kind of training that goes with that first aspect of the project.
Yeah. So now you got kind of cut you off on that. So now you go from the training to the education.
Right. Education is where you had mentioned about the logo. What we want is we want our community partners, of course, in our community, we want to support local businesses. So what we do is we'll send out just a general brief training outline that owners and managers can review with their employees. And it's just a baseline familiarity, understanding of what autism is. And then what they'll do is once they complete that training, they'll reach out to me. And at that point, I provide them with the logos to put on the door of their business. And what we want to do, it serves 2 purposes. Number 1, we're sharing awareness and understanding. And number 2, we're also telling the families, the parents, the teachers, the therapists, when they go into that business and see that logo on the door, they know if inside that business things were to go sideways and they needed assistance, the people inside have an understanding of what it is they're looking for.
Yeah. And I got this sticker here. It's kind of interesting as well. So if you look at it, it says attention. Person inside with autism may not respond to verbal commands. So it might not be, because we're so used to law enforcement, like, listen to what I'm telling you, do what I tell you I'm telling you to do. Right. And if you don't do that, then that's a problem. So you really don't know exactly who's inside. But with this sticker, this could really save a person's life. It could, let the police officer know, or the first responder, the fireman, of the situation. That's crucial.
What we're doing with that's our window decal. What we do with that is we do a couple of things. First one is we ask the parent to put it on the window of the door of their vehicle the individual most commonly sits.
Okay.
Which in most cases, in a 4-door car, it's the rear passenger seat. The reason why they sit in the rear passenger seat is for a few reasons. Number one, most newer cars have the child safety lock where they can't open the door from the inside of the car. Number two, it takes away the opportunity for the person sitting in the front seat to grab the gears of the car, grab the driver, grab the steering wheel. So it's another safety measure. The third thing is sitting in the rear passenger seat, it's the least amount of distraction you're giving the driver, because they can look up in the rearview mirror, and the area of the car they can most easily see is that rear passenger seat.
Okay.
So what we do is we tell them, put that on the car. Then we tell them, as long as it's in accordance with HOA rules and your landlord and things like that, put it on the front door of your house. So if fire and EMS come to the house, they see that on the door. They know once they get inside the threshold of that house, it may not be a conventional call for service. The last thing that we do is we tell them to put the last decal on the bedroom door. And the reason for that is, let's say it's a scenario where neighbor calls, says, hey, I see smoke coming out of your laundry room, and the house is evacuated. Well, again, going back to autism is about consistency. They're about routine. They don't like new things brought towards them. There's a heightened level of adaptation that they have to go through. So if they get that call and they walk outside the house, well, what happens when they get outside the house and now there's the fire truck and the neighbors and the media and law enforcement and everybody else responding? Where are they most likely to go? Back into the house.
Right.
And obviously we don't want that. So what that decal on the bedroom door means, it tells fire when they're doing that cursory search of the house, don't just make it visual. When they see that decal on the door, go in there, look in the closet, look under the bed, look behind the dresser, and just give that extra few seconds of certainty that nobody else has gone back into that room.
Yeah, it's all important, and great, tips for all of us. So that component, no doubt, one of your objectives, the education, is crucial. People need to know, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And last, on the objections, I know we got a lot more to the support problem or the program, but last one
is support.
Yeah,
exactly. So, and the support aspect is kind of like what we were talking about before your show started today. Is we want to make sure that we're maintaining and have an ongoing level of communication. We're always telling everybody that we present to, we're always telling them, look, if you have to ask yourself, is this something I can reach out and ask this question to the Sheriff's Office Autism Project? The answer is always yes. Please reach out. We'd much rather you reach out to us and we say, that might not be necessarily something that we can address, but here's A, B, and C on various resources you might want to ask that question to. The same thing we provide when information comes forward to us, updates in technology, updates in various resources or types of therapy, we go ahead and we'll pass that information out. One of the things that we did was we built an SME group, subject matter experts.
Okay.
And it's about 30 individuals, but they're a great cross section of our community. And sometimes I'll get questions posed to me, and even though I've been teaching this a long time, sometimes you just get that question where you're like, wow, I've never had that. And what I'll do is I'll take that information and I'll pass it along to the SME group, and I'll say, can anybody offer insight on this? And they've been fantastic about coming forward. Here's resources, here's people to call, here's ideas that we can generate. And then I take that information and I pass it back to the parent or the caregiver that asked the question.
Yeah, I can imagine you just get a lot. And then you would obviously be a subject matter expert, right? Because you have your son and you teach a lot, you're educated, get the word out. So I just think that there's probably a lot of people that do maybe have questions, and then you're able to help them out. Do you see a lot of kids? I know that talks give me a few stats. It's autism is the fastest growing childhood disability in the United States. Do we have any reason why? Do we know, or what have you heard? And again, at the sheriff's office level, do you get a lot of calls for service with people with autism?
We don't have a disposition to be able to say a particular call for service was based on autism.
Right.
We don't have that clearance code. But what Patrol and what CID do a very good job of is, I'm on the CID call out email list. So sometimes when information comes forward and they'll put in the narrative, the detective might put in the narrative of that incident they went out on, that autism was an issue. I usually reach out to that detective, and ask a few questions, ask if there's any way that I can help or assist. But I also have patrol supervisors do a fantastic job of, field supervisors as well. They'll call me up and they'll go, hey, look, we had this call for service yesterday. This is the information we had. This is how we acted on it. Is there anything that we missed? And we'll talk it out. And we'll come up with, hey, down the road, here's a better strategy. Here's a way to be more efficient. And here's resources you can reach out to. So it's, again, that support aspect is constantly evolving. We always want to make sure that that's always something that we share. I do get quite a few questions. Obviously, the more promotion we're doing with the project, the more people that are reaching out, but that's exactly what we want to have.
Yeah. And it goes back to kind of like the days. I spent a lot of days at the sheriff's office, right? 31 years. It goes back to a lot of people, like, they don't want to call us because they're in a situation like they feel like they're bothering us, right? But if we can ultimately get a situation controlled and give people help, if we can do it initially, it's probably going to assist on us having to go back. I remember a real young girl that she would get lost frequently from her house, and we spent a lot of time going to the house looking for the child, which that's what we do, right? We're not never complain about it, but if we went ahead and come up with like a solution to try to help them out, it's going to be, in the long run, it's going to be a better solution for us because it's going to be taking up less of our time.
Right. And that's an outstanding point, because we want to make sure, like you said, people think that they're bothering us. And that's why such a strong point of emphasis with us is, look, there is no silly question. We want to, if anything, if you reach out to us and go, hey, look, I'm not really sure this is something that the sheriff's office handles, maybe it isn't, but yet they're still helping to educate us so we can be more efficient, more effective in how we progress with this project. So I'm always encouraging people. In fact, the sheriff's office created an email address simply for this project, and it's autism@colliersheriff.org.
That's fantastic. We kind of jumped over it, and it was a little bit. Do you know what obviously we don't know the root cause of autism, I don't think. Do you have any input on that, or are you thoughts?
The most common believed origins, number one, is always going to be vaccinations. People always believe that there's a strong correlation between vaccinations and autism. Then there's gluten, casein, celiac disease, believing it's part of result of a wheat-based allergy. There's other ones that believe it's prenatal. It could have something to do with children that are born via C-section or placenta abnormalities. There's a number, probably 7 or 8 primary topics of points of origin. And, asking what my opinion is, like you mentioned, as a parent, I've never really preoccupied myself with
that's the answer I was going to say. It doesn't really matter, right? We got to do it.
It does, because we want to be that support mechanism. However,
right.
I always point it as the glass half full, glass half empty. I don't know what caused it, but I can't preoccupy myself with sitting back and being upset about it. I have to move forward. What can we do positive? My son is 19 years old. So last year when he turned 18 in the state of Florida, even though you've been disabled your whole life, you turn 18, you're considered an independent adult. So you have to go through the courts and establish guardianship. There's so many things that as you move forward, there's roughly 15,000 programs nationwide for autism related disabilities. But once they turn 18, that 15,000 becomes 3,500.
Wow.
So, and then what happens as your child's aging? Now the questions become, okay, well, I may be getting older. I may have declining health. I may develop an inability to care for my child. You have to, if you ever want to draw silence in a conversation, walk into a room with your siblings and say, hey, if something ever happens to me, who wants to raise my special needs child?
Yeah.
And they're not doing it maliciously, but it's very hard. First thing they ask you when you write up a will, do you have children? And when you say yes, they say, okay, well, who's going to care for the children if something were to happen to you? And you don't have that answer. Yeah. So it took me 5 years to get my will written, And my point is not my situation, but my point is these are the kind of things that we want to tell parents. Look, you're not alone in this. There are resources. It's okay to say, hey, I need to walk outside. It's not the burden you have to carry on your shoulders every day. It's okay to say I need a break.
Yeah.
But then what resources provide that? And that's part of what we want to do.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you say here, like, a characteristic of autism is uniqueness to problem solving. Give me a little example of expound on that.
I knew a family that had a son, Trevor, fantastic young man, nonverbal. And he was prone to chronic ear infections. So we're over their house one day and he was playing with a particular toy, some item, but that toy is a priority to him. And he drops it in the water. So the dad I'm standing next to, and of course mom says, hey, he dropped that. And the dad says, let's play it out. Let's see how he solves this. Now, you and I, what are we thinking? We're thinking, I'm going to ask somebody to dive in and get it, but what if you can't speak? And then we're thinking, I'll go over and I'll get the skimmer and I'll reach over. But that's not something an 8-year-old is thinking about. So we stood there and we watched him. And what he did was he realized he couldn't put his head underwater. So he turns around, puts his foot over the item, and he slides it across the pool floor and he slides it up the wall to a point where he can reach under his foot up against the wall and grab it without putting his head underwater. And the father and I both look at each other and I said, you know what? If I was trying to problem solve in a manner that unique, I would still be in the pool.
Yeah.
I would have never thought about that. But their problem solving is so creative. And you sit there and you go, and it's funny because sometimes you'll see classes where the kids are coming together and you kind of stand there to observe the class. And it's funny because the kids kind of have an interaction where they're almost like, hey, how frustrating is every day for you? Because
right.
My parents are driving me crazy.
Right.
And so again, and that's what we want to remind parents. It's okay to laugh.
Yeah. Yeah. I've got, obviously I've got some super, super awesome friends, that have children with autism. And to me, it's obviously got to be very, it's got to be tiring sometimes. So, I always offer and try to say, hey, listen, if you need a chance, you need some way to get away, let me know. But you just can't let anybody with kids because it's a different situation, and speaking to them, and they do have a lot of like interesting, funny things, and they really are super people. So they laugh about it a little bit. Right. So, and my job is to be supportive for them, whatever they need. I try to help them out, and I just think the kids in general, kids in general are very awesome anyway. So kids, with special needs, no matter what the special need might be, I think it's an amazing thing. And like you said, to sit back and watch.
Well, I'll tell you a quick story. We, my wife and daughter, their birthdays are a week apart. So the week of their birthdays, I always send them up to Disney. So what we do is my son and I, we decide to go out. I take his tablet and I put the logos of all these restaurants. And I said, hey, you pick where we're going to lunch today. So he picks Olive Garden. Well, I didn't know that Olive Garden trips were part of his class, part of his work. That was a reward. Right. So we walk into this restaurant and it was like Norm from Cheers. Everybody's like, hey, calling him by his first name. And of course he can't tell me the story. And I'm looking at him and he's just giving me a thumbs up. Like, I got this. So it's right at 11 o'clock in the morning because I'm thinking it's better to go before it gets crowded. So we walk in and there's literally one other couple in the restaurant. So I'm walking, my son is behind me, and he, I guess, because of consistency, he had the same booth that he went to. Well, we walk, I get to the booth, I turn around to see him and to have him seated, and he's got a breadstick. We're in Olive Garden, and I'm like, where in the heck
how'd you get that?
And this gentleman, the one booth, he turned and walked by and snagged it right out of the basket. And the gentleman's yelling to me, it's okay, he can have it. And I'm mortified. I'm thinking, oh my Lord, we're going to have to, settle this in court. So of course we send a dessert to their table. We thank them so much for their hospitality, but Terry's got a ridiculous smile on his face. And I always tell people, even though my son can't talk, he's got a great sense of humor.
Yeah, no, I love your posts. You guys go out to eat and you do all kinds of good things. And, it's got to get tiring, I'm sure, but just the things that you do really choke me up. I mean, it's amazing. And
Thank you.
I just have like I said, a special space and in for that, for those type of kids. And the thing about it is, I think with autism too, is like, if you have a boy or a girl that's got Down syndrome, right, people can identify that readily, right? But it takes, like with autism, I mean, for the most part, look just like everybody else, right? So when the kid's like acting up, maybe doing something a little bit different, they're not, most people at first don't really notice what's happening. Is that sometimes come up?
No, very true. And what we do as part of the training, like last week or earlier this week, when I was working with Greater Naples Fire, and Battalion Chief Andrew Krasuski with Greater Naples Fire has been phenomenal with helping getting that program implemented with his department. What we find is, one of the things that we talk about is, the next time the particular fire crew is walking through Publix, it always seems to be in the candy aisle or in the cereal aisle.
Yeah, firemen, man, they go to Publix all the time. Yeah, and they fill up carts, and they drive me crazy. No, I'm just kidding.
But I told him, I said,
love the fire.
When you walk by the candy aisle and what in the past you have believed to be just a misbehaving child, give it a second and look for that repetitive behavior that we were talking about. Because you're going to see it, because the repetitive behavior usually comes as a prompt from something outside of their routine, or it's how they address anxiety. So where you and I might have a situation that we walk away from, or we might question it, they're going to demonstrate that repetitive behavior. And again, it could be something subtle. It could be just rocking back and forth. Rocking back and forth on their feet. It could be pulling their hands back and fluttering their hands like they're trying to fly. But you're always, in most cases, going to see that repetitive behavior. So it does, you're hit it, right on the head when you said there's no physical identifiers. And you're absolutely right. So you don't have the benefit of being able to look over and say, hey, I think I recognize that child might have a disability. You don't have that. So what appears to you to just be misbehavior is in reality part of a medical diagnosis.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting. And, some of the kids and this all goes back into your program, there's major differences in levels and, severity and, how kids can function. And I guess different level spectrums, I guess you might, if you will, just talk a little bit about that and how, not just public safety, fire, EMS, law enforcement, how they can identify, but just, people out there,
Sure.
Obviously observation, right?
The Florida Department of Education classifies autism. They have various levels, but they also use a number. 251 to 255. 251 is very minimal, pretty much mainstream student, no accommodations, no support staff. But a 255 is profoundly disabled, always going to be with the support staff, never going to be alone, no ability to communicate or self-care. I should say they don't speak. They can communicate through what they call assistive technologies, which would be a laptop or a tablet for you and I. So right along those lines, one of the things that we talk about in the training is, and that I talk to parents about, it's okay to ask what your child's matrix score is, because if I'm part of a group of deputies responding to a scene and there's only one piece of information I can provide, I would want to be able to provide that matrix score, because it's still at least giving you a baseline understanding of the level of cooperation or interaction I'm going to have with that individual. So if I said 251, I'm probably going to be able to have a conversation, seek information, give direction, gain compliance. But 255, you're not going to get that because none of those are in place. So it's when you talk about the levels, it's important to know that. It would be ideal to be able to have that to share. But again, that information is available, but you usually have to ask for that to be provided.
Right. So a little bit back to the program, and we kind of got it here. The name is the Autism Support Project. However, I think you kind of want to get it out there like, hey, listen, if there's any childhood disabilities, the sheriff's office will try to at least point you to different directions. And it's kind of interesting. We find ourselves in law enforcement, how we really support these things that maybe not generally law enforcement, but they will be related, because ultimately we might have to deal with somebody with autism, and then, obviously it's for their safety, the community's safety, and everybody's safety. But we're not just talking about just autism. I think we're there to support. I keep saying we. I think the sheriff's office is there to support other kids with disabilities as well, if they can.
Well, I worked for you for a long time, and you're always going to be part of us.
And I always want to be part of it.
Absolutely. So what we tell people is, what we looked at was, because of the rate of diagnosis, in 2006, there was 161 kids in the Clark County Public Schools that had an autism diagnosis. At the start of this school year, roughly 15 years later, that number is almost 1,000. It's 931. Wow. So that was the biggest reason, one of the biggest reasons why we went with Autism Support Project. We wanted to pick that one point. But the way we approached it was because we felt as though if we made it more general, we would kind of be drinking from the fire hose, and we wouldn't be as effective as we wanted to be. So we picked autism as the starting point, and it's basically like concentric circles when you throw a rock in the water. We're going to take that starting point, and as the program and the project evolves, we're going to expound more and more. We're going to become more capable of providing resources and ideas and education to a number of different disabilities. Autism is just a starting point. It's not the end.
Yeah, no, it's great. And I'd like to thank Sheriff Rambosk and obviously Colonel Bloom and you and everybody that you have that works with you doing this. I just think it's a great thing, and obviously you see the benefits, and you brought it to the forefront as well. And you're actually, a little bit about Dan, he's not telling you, but he's basically nationally, I guess the word is nationally recognized and renowned for teaching law enforcement throughout the United States, which it's a really cool thing. And you were doing that years back. So it's great that they figured out that, hey, we've got the best guy here in our county. Let's utilize him to get this program.
Well, I have been teaching it for a number of years, but I'm very fortunate because I'm surrounded with wonderful people. My chain of command, all the way up to the colonel and the sheriff, 100% supportive. It's mostly, I've never had anybody come to me and say, hey, why are we doing that? Instead, they've come to me and said, what do you need? Yeah. And that, as well as I do, spend 30 plus years in this career field. That doesn't come along very often. So when you do, it's definitely a pattern for success.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Dan. I appreciate you coming on, Sarge. It's been a pleasure. Anytime you want to come on and spread the word, we're here for you, and we're glad to have you.
Thanks, Chief. We appreciate you.
All right, thank you. 239 Uncensored, everything Southwest Florida and beyond, and we just do a little ouch. Thanks, Sarge.